Greetings one and all to another Dark Rider pony analysis. I am the Nightmare Rider, Major Mine, reminding you, as always, that even a cheeseburger can be deconstructed to its original source. If there is one element of fantasy literature that is absolutely necessary, it's world building, especially when it comes to magic. We need to establish clear rules and mechanics as to how everything is supposed to work so that we can believe the characters are acting realistically within the context of the world. If there were no rules, there would be no drama to the story, since there would be no reason that the characters can't do absolutely anything to overcome the threat. As an example, as much as I love Kamen Rider Wizard, it is an example of writers being inconsistent with their world building, since it's established early on that Haruto has a limit to the resource of mana in which he can cast spells with and use his Kamen Rider powers. However, later in the series, it's pretty much completely forgotten, leaving him with no established reason why he doesn't just henshin straight into his infinity form and one-shot most of the bad guys, which he is clearly shown to be able to do. The dividing factor from It Ain't Easy being Breezies is how much the lore around the Breezies makes sense within the world of Equestria. I don't have time to go over every single critique, as there has been a lot of them, but frequent viewers will know that I criticise some point more harshly depending on the intent of the story. With Pinky's behaviour in Philly Vanilli being a prime example, It Ain't Easy being Breezies is another character-focused episode, so the full details on how the Breezies are supposed to function in Equestria aren't as important as the conflict that is established between the characters. Just because it's less important does not mean it's not important at all, however. It is a matter of what is the limit to the amount of necessary information you have to give to make them a believable creature within a 22-minute episode. The three most common critiques I find about the Breezes are: how did they survive in Equestria without fatalities or injuries? Why did they need to travel to Equestria for pollen when they may very well have it within their own world? And what reason do the ponies have to help them when they clearly can't help themselves? Regarding the first point, we have seen close calls happen in this episode where Seabreeze nearly gets attacked by bees. It has shown how dangerous the journey is, so it is safe to assume that accidents do happen. This doesn't need to be spelled out for us. That, and it is established how much the Breezies fly in groups to share the breeze and general safety numbers. The second point is something I do agree with a bit more. It would have given more weight and urgencies to the Breezies returning home. However, the fact that they could be cut off from their home at an undetermined amount of time, in addition to the fact Equestria is a very dangerous place for them to live in due to their miniature size, is enough of a threat for me to believe that the conflict has urgency. As Voice of Reason said in his Flash review, the pollen is more of a MacGuffin to explain why they need to be in Equestria to begin with. On top of that, the purpose of the Breeze in this episode was to show how Fluttershy is acting kind to the point where she is actually doing more harm than good by sheltering them, something I will explain how well it worked in a bit. The reason of Fluttershy's kindness can also be applied as to why the ponies have some sort of symbiotic relationship with the Breezies to begin with. It is a plot hole that is never quite explained what the ponies get from helping the Breezies, or if Ponyville is the only town to do so. However, that history isn't exactly relevant here, since all the episode is trying to do is provide a scenario where Fluttershy's kindness is both her greatest strength and her greatest weakness. It is the strength since her compassion is what has driven her to become an animal expert, knowing how to help them the best. But it is also her weakness since it allows her to be manipulated by the Breezies, making puppy dog eyes, exploiting Fluttershy's desire to treat them with great care. The Breezies themselves are clearly shown to be afraid of facing the long journey home without many of their friends, so it's reasonable to assume that they want to stay with Fluttershy because of that fear, forgetting the life they had at home. Now, I've alluded to it long enough, it's time to say exactly why the characterization shines so well in this episode. Firstly, every single member of the main five is taking Fluttershy seriously, working with her to adjust their normal behaviour to ensure that the Breezes are kept safe. I especially love how Rainbow Dash and Pinkie Pie act in this episode. Rainbow Dash has come to seriously learn to trust Fluttershy's judgment since Hurricane Fluttershy, making an extra effort to command the early Ponyville Pegasi on creating a minimal breeze so that the Breezies can remain safe. This is Rainbow Dash at her most mature, an aspect of a character that really needs to be given bigger emphasis like in Flight to the Finish. Pinkie also shows just how well Natasha Livinger can write her, as evidenced by Pinkie Apple Pie. Pinkie Pie is of course excited to see how adorable the Breezies are, but she is making a huge effort to remain quiet so she doesn't disturb the Breezies, something she is clearly having trouble doing. This provides some great comedy moments that made me laugh out loud quite a bit, especially with Rarity's overly shiny coat. But of course, the absolute best dynamic in the whole episode was between Fluttershy and Seabreeze. This is what makes the Breezies active characters and not just plot devices. Seabreeze is an aggressive commander, desperate to get everyone home, but constantly being ignored by the other Breezies out of fear. He means well, but he is always talking down to the other Breezies in such an aggressive manner, treating them like they're idiots for not listening to them, as well as making mistakes. On the other hand, Fluttershy is so overly concerned with the safety of the fragile Breezies that she ends up treating them like babies and avoiding all risk, which never makes any progress in getting them home either. It's a similar situation to Putting Your Hoof Down, which, while I liked the episode, did need to push the characters to an extremely unlikable levels to explain the moral of balancing assertiveness with kindness. Unlike that episode, here we see Fluttershy having both an understandable reason as to why she is so careful with the fragile Breezies, while not needing to make her or Seabreeze extremely mean-spirited when being assertive. This is a fantastic contrast between Fluttershy and Seabreeze, providing a dual lesson to them both. It's all about the level of kindness you show and where you place that kindness. Seabreeze being kind and supportive to a struggling Breezy that wants to fly home, giving it moral support to keep it going, while Fluttershy being firm with the Breezies, who are avoiding their responsibilities due to it being scary and difficult, as I said before, gave them the motivation to face their difficult challenge head on. The biggest problem I honestly had with this episode was Spike. If anything, he felt more like a plot device than anything else. Considering how everyone has been making evident how fragile the Breezies are, you'd think he'd go to Twilight to get a leg up to see everything. But instead, he carelessly climbs a tree and then initiates the conflict for the whole episode. But by far the most controversial part of this episode is when Twilight turns all the main six into Breezies. Many have called this a contrived Deus Ex Machina. This is quite blatantly done to sell new toys. However, I don't think it's a Deus Ex Machina at all. Let's keep in mind that Twilight already knows the metamorphosis spell in some fashion, as we've seen in Bats and Too Many Pinkie Pies. Not to mention the fact that she outright stated she'd been reading up spells in Luna's castle. Given how much Twilight had had time to study in the library, and based off her existing knowledge, casting a spell on the Breezes that transforms the main six into one of them isn't out of the question for me. Overall, this was another very entertaining episode. It had many amazing, fantastic character payoffs that improved the moral of Putting Your Hoof Down, numerous moments of well-placed comedy, and an extra dose of world building with the Breezes that make the fantasy world feel more alive and vibrant. It could have had a few better explained plot elements here and there, as well as a more active role for Spike, but overall it's still proving that Natasha Livinger could quickly become one of the better writers for this show. I give It Ain't Easy Being Breezies a final grade of a straight A. Until the next review, this is the Nightmare Rider, Major Mind, riding out.